The Nine of Swords is about the mental anguish that keeps you up in the middle of the night. Stay tuned to learn how to handle this card when it comes up in a reading and why the Nine of Swords isn't as depressing as it looks. Hi everybody, I'm Sue Ellen Clayton. Welcome to my channel where we'll be learning the tarot deck one card at a time. Today's video is about the Nine of Swords. This video will begin with a short description of the card. Next, I'll briefly explain what the card means when it appears in a reading. Then we'll talk about what each element symbolizes and what the card means when it shows up in both the upright and reversed position in a reading. I'll share some examples from my life so you can relate to the card in a real-world situation. And stay tuned until the end and I'll give you several questions to help you connect with the card. I will be using the Rider-Waite Tarot in this video. You'll find the link to the deck below, as well as to the many books that I've used in my research. So let's get started. In the Nine of Swords, we see a woman sitting up in bed with her hands over her face. She is wearing a gray nightgown. Her bed has a thin mattress that is mostly white. It is covered with a quilt that features red roses on a yellow background, alternating with zodiac signs on a blue background. There is a carving on the bed that shows one person beating another person. There are 9 blue swords over her head. The background is pitch black. When the Nine of Swords card appears in a reading, it is all about the out-of-control thoughts that keep you up at night. These thoughts might manifest as fear, guilt, anxiety, stress, sadness, depression, or reliving the past. You may also be awake due to receiving unexpected news or being in physical pain. The interesting point is that a lot of this mental torment is self-created because it's about things that most likely won't even happen. Also, you need to remember that things will seem more manageable during the light of day than the middle of the night. This card offers you the opportunity to examine your thoughts and figure out if you're creating a worst-case scenario rather than looking at things more logically. It might be time to seek professional help so that you can sleep at night. So let's talk about the symbolism in this card. We see a woman sitting up in bed with her hands over her face. This shows that she's experiencing strong emotions, likely fear, shame, or sadness, and doesn't want to see what is happening around her. The only other card in the tarot deck that has a completely black background is the Devil, which is number 13, and its theme is about things in your life that create emotional bondage. The black background creates a feeling of total despair. The woman has gray hair and is wearing a gray nightgown. The gray nightgown represents intense feelings of sadness and hopelessness. The gray hair indicates that she is an older woman or that her worries have literally aged her. Notice that she is in bed. Beds are traditionally a place of rest and relaxation. She is doing neither. She is clearly experiencing some kind of anguish. The carving on the bed shows someone being murdered. Some scholars believe that this carving illustrates the Bible story of Cain and Abel. If you're not familiar with the story, it's about 2 brothers who made sacrifices to God. Cain got greedy and kept some of his sacrifice for himself, so God preferred Abel's sacrifice. Cain got jealous and killed Abel. The murder weapon in the carving appears to be a bone. The mattress is mostly white, which is about peace, purity, and innocence. It is a very thin and uncomfortable-looking mattress. This makes me doubt that she'd experience peace even if she were to lie down and to try to sleep. On her bed is a lovely quilt that features red roses on a yellow background, alternating with zodiac signs on a blue background. The red roses represent beauty, passion, vitality, and love. The yellow background is sunny, which is all about clarity and protection. These images look very similar to the images in the Magician card, which is all about manifesting what you desire. Sadly, she can't see the beauty in front of her because she's covering her eyes. The astrological signs on the quilt might symbolize that her potential happiness is interrupted by feelings so strong that they encompass the entire universe. There are 9 swords over her head. The swords are a cold blue color, which represents cold, unyielding facts. This begs the question, are the issues that are keeping her up at night actually true? The placement of the 9 swords can be seen as a ladder so that she has a way to climb out of her pain. Conversely, you can view them as bars over a window that give her no way of escaping her feelings. Take a look at the bottom 3 swords, which appear to be piercing her head, throat, and heart. Pam Richards, in her book Understanding Tarot, describes the significance of their placement this way. What started out as thoughts are now physically impacting her body. One sword passes through her heart, triggering emotional pain, causing her to reflect with worry over her losses. One sword lines up with her throat, showing worry over words and communication with all things said or unsaid. And the final sword passes over into her mind, which represents concerns over certain thoughts, opinions, and beliefs, all bringing mental anguish. Her mind is being tortured by what might be when or if the swords come crashing down on her. Note that the handles of the swords form a crisscross pattern behind her. This could indicate her thoughts are not isolated, but part of a pattern based on what's happened in the past. It's possible that this is the same woman shown in the 8 of Swords, so she's been freed from bondage and moved forward to being tortured by her thoughts. Lucky girl. When the 9 of Swords appears in an upright position, it is all about the mental torments that keep you awake at night. So you could be having nightmares or feeling despair, fear, anxious, worried, sad, or depressed. It could symbolize insomnia and the fact that you are being overwhelmed by your feelings to the extent that you can't sleep at night. Or you are reliving past events and spending the night ruminating about how stupid you are. You could be feeling guilty, so your thoughts are about either blaming yourself or refusing to forgive yourself. The 9 of Swords can represent that you are having nightmares. It can indicate grief and show that you are crying or want to cry. It can show that you are very lonely. It can also represent other physical issues that wake you up at night, such as pain or hot flashes caused by menopause. It might also represent shocking news that keeps you from getting back to sleep. I had this happen a few years ago. I was reading email before bed, which is not exactly a good habit for trying to get a restful sleep. There was an email from my mom saying that my dad had fallen, broken his hip, and was awaiting emergency surgery. The news came as a total shock, and I didn't get a lot of sleep that night. This card can represent coming up with worst-case scenarios. I have to admit that I am guilty of this one. The interesting point is that 99% of these out-of-control thoughts are about things that will never happen. The 9 of Swords can also relate to isolation, celibacy, and the monastic life. This came up a lot in my research, and I'm not exactly sure why. I believe that the austerity of the room and the fact that she is so alone made it look like how a nun would live. Or it could be that things are so bad that you just want to retreat from the world and join a monastery. Finally, the 9 of Swords can represent mental illness. Here's an example from my life about nightmares keeping you up at night. I have a friend who is a gifted psychic. For many years, she worked with police departments to help locate missing people. She would get her information through dreams that would wake her up in the middle of the night. Most of the people had been murdered, and understandably, her dreams were vivid and disturbing. She described a few of her cases to me, and they were beyond gruesome because she could literally see people getting murdered. Finally, she decided that she did not want to do this anymore, and she actually prayed to her higher power and asked for the nightmares to stop, and they did. Honestly, I don't think I could get to sleep if I knew I was going to be having those kinds of dreams. When the 9 of Swords appears in a reversed position, it can signify the same things as the upright card, but in a more extreme way. The content of your dreams might be more vivid, or you may have additional feelings that make the situation worse. As an example, let's say you wake up in the middle of the night because you are in pain, something that happens to me, and you can't get back to sleep. You could take a Tylenol, pull out your heating pad, and watch a YouTube video until your pain lessens to the point that you could get back to sleep. Or you could make a bad situation worse by Googling information about pain, then convincing yourself that your pain is caused by a fatal disease, and you'll end up in a wheelchair, lose your job, and end up dying alone and penniless. That is the kind of reversed Nine of Swords thinking where your thoughts actually make things worse that I'm talking about. Other meanings of the reversed Nine of Swords include that you are avoiding or denying your feelings of fear, sadness, anxiety, or loneliness. That although you thought you'd hit rock bottom in the upright card, things have continued to get worse. That the worst is over and you are entering a period of physical, mental, or spiritual healing. That you are releasing your fears, sadness, and anxiety. Or it could mean that you're not exaggerating. Your thoughts are actually accurate and legitimate. Here's an example of the reverse Nine of Swords from my life about my thoughts making things worse than they already were. Earlier in the video, I mentioned about reading an email right before bed that my father fell and broke his hip. This situation happened during COVID. I live in the United States and my parents live in Canada. At that time, the Canadian border was closed due to COVID, although you could get a compassionate exception. But you needed a physician to say it was an end-of-life situation, and there were a lot of regulations that you needed to adhere to. So not only was I upset to learn that my father needed surgery, I made the whole situation worse by researching COVID regulations and psyching myself out about what would happen if he did not survive. Could I get a compassionate exemption? Could I visit him because regulations required that I needed to quarantine? Where would I quarantine? How could I plan a funeral when I couldn't even leave the house? You get the idea. Needless to say, this rabbit hole of research made things a lot worse than they actually were. In the end, none of the worry was necessary because he survived, and he's still alive and kicking 4 years later. Here are some questions to help you connect with the Nine of Swords. Number 1, what keeps you up at night? Is it fear, anxiety, grief, pain, or ruminating about past situations? Number 2, what tools can you use to break free from those negative thoughts? Is it time to seek professional help? Number 3, what are your dreams trying to tell you? Number 4, have you isolated yourself from friends and family to the extent it's almost like you're living in a monastery? Is it time to reconnect? And number 5, how likely is it that the scenario you're worrying about is going to happen? In other words, are your worst case fears really going to come true? So I hope this video has given you a good look into the Nine of Swords. Please join me for the next video, which is the Ten of Swords.